I see you, I appreciate you, and I'm thankful you subscribed and keep showing up. This space is built on your insights. Leave your thoughts and lessons below. Now, cue the tension, cue the truth. Let's get into it. Before this starts, let me give you one useful thing to watch for. If your spouse suddenly starts protecting their phone like it has a pulse, but becomes strangely critical of your ordinary kindness at the same time, that combination matters. Secrecy by itself can be explained away. Contempt usually tells the truth first. In this story, I missed that shift for months. I thought I was being patient. What I was really being was available to be lied to. If you have ever had that gut feeling that something was off in a relationship, stay with me, because this story shows exactly how fast a marriage can collapse when lies start hiding in plain sight. And before we go further, like this video, share it with somebody who needs this reminder, and subscribe for more raw relationship drama stories with real consequences. My name is Andre Tolliver, and the first crack in my marriage did not sound dramatic. It sounded like ice clicking against a glass. That was the noise I heard when my wife, Renee, came in after 10 on a Thursday in late October, set her keys in the blue bowl by the door, and poured herself bourbon without asking whether I wanted one. We had been married 12 years, living in a brick row house in Baltimore with narrow stairs, old radiator heat, and windows that rattled when the city buses sighed past at night. She stood in the kitchen in a camel coat, not looking at me, and said her boss had kept everyone late again. By then, I already knew the name she was going to say. Darius Whitfield, founder of a logistics company with downtown offices, and the kind of confidence people mistake for competence when there is enough money around it. Renee had started saying his name too often and too carefully. The way people say a word they know lands hard. Darius thinks bigger than most people. Darius says the team needs sharper instincts. Darius can spot weakness in 5 minutes. Every time she said it, something in her tone flattened me. Not because she admired him, because she had started using him to measure me. I am not a flashy man. I work for the city as a senior procurement analyst, which means I spend my days untangling contracts, checking numbers, catching mistakes people hope nobody notices. I iron my own shirts on Sunday nights. I keep a tin of cinnamon mints in my desk drawer. When I get nervous, I line up pens until they are exactly parallel. Renee used to tease me about that. She would kiss my cheek, slide one pen crooked on purpose, and say, "There, now your soul can stretch." In the beginning, she liked my steadiness. Later, she called it smallness. The night I am talking about, she stood at the sink with that bourbon in her hand and told me I should stop waiting for dinner for her because grown women do not need curfews. I had not mentioned dinner. I had reheated red beans and rice for myself 20 minutes earlier and left her a plate in the oven with foil over it. That is the thing about guilt. It picks fights with sentences you have not spoken yet. I watched her shoulders in the kitchen light and felt that old instinct rise up, the one that says keep the peace, lower your voice, let morning make things simpler. I chose not to push her that night, and that was the first decision that could have gone differently. I could have demanded her phone, accused her outright, started a scene that ended with neighbors hearing our marriage split through old plaster walls. I did not, partly because I was afraid of being wrong, and partly because I knew if something ugly was really growing in our house, I needed truth more than noise. So I washed my plate, turned off the porch light, and lay awake beside a woman whose breathing sounded calm enough to insult me. November in Baltimore has a damp cold that gets into your wrists. The next morning, I took the Orange Line bus downtown, past the corner store with a faded crab chip sign, and tried to focus on bid summaries while the night kept replaying in pieces. Around noon, my cousin Lionel called from his barbershop on North Avenue. Lionel had cut my hair since college. He had a low laugh, a precise hand, and the gift of asking one question that made him feel childish. "Are you busy?" he asked. I said yes. He said, "Good. Come by anyway." Lionel's shop smelled like talc, coffee, and clipper oil. Men were lined along the wall talking ravens. School zoning, rent, all the ordinary architecture of a neighborhood staying alive. He tilted my chair back, draped me, and said, "Now tell me what is your forehead folded like a church bulletin." I told him Renee had changed. I said she was sharp with me lately, secretive with her phone, always running late for client dinners. I tried to say it lightly. He stopped clipping for half a second. Andre, he said, looking at me in the mirror. Some people cheat before they touch anybody. They start by making home feel stupid. I carried that sentence for days. I noticed things I'd filed away before. Renee buying perfume she never wore around me, leaving earlier on Fridays when her office had half days, making fun of my habit of bringing coffee in a thermos instead of buying it for $6 downstairs. She had started speaking in polished little verdicts, like she was presenting her life to a panel. Ambition requires access. You have to be around people who move. Comfort is where talent goes to die. We used to laugh on our back steps eating carry-out fries under a crooked porch light. Now she talked like a brochure. The proof, when it came, arrived small. Not a dramatic message. Not lipstick on a collar. A parking receipt. I was looking for a takeout menu in the glove box of her Honda and found a validated ticket from the Harbor Crown Hotel garage on a Sunday afternoon. Her company did not host events there on Sundays. I knew because I handle event. Reimbursements sometimes, and habit makes me remember invoices. My hands went cold. I sat in the driver's seat with rain tapping the windshield and thought about how many lives a marriage can hold before it stops being one. That evening, Renee told me she was meeting a friend from grad school. She wore a green blouse I had bought her for our 10th anniversary, and earrings she only put on when she wanted to feel admired. I watched her check herself in the hallway mirror, not for beauty exactly, but for effect, and something inside me settled. Not peace, precision. After she left, I stood in our kitchen, opened the little drawer by the stove where we kept batteries and takeout soy sauce, and took out the spare phone charger. I do not snoop well. My pulse made me clumsy, but I waited. When she came home, she showered immediately and fell asleep with her phone on the dresser, not under a pillow where she had begun keeping it. I told myself to let it go. Then I heard Lionel again. They start by making home feel stupid. I checked the phone. It was locked, but message previews were enough. You looked incredible tonight. Next time, no hotel bar. And one from a saved contact labeled only DW. You deserve a bigger life than that row house. I had to sit down on the edge of the bed because the room turned narrow around me. I did not wake her. I did not cry then either, which surprised me. I felt embarrassed at first, which is a lonely kind of pain. Embarrassment makes even your private grief feel public. I thought about my mother at New Psalmist every Sunday asking after Renee with genuine warmth. I thought about the cedar chest in our bedroom holding our wedding album and the first mortgage letter we had framed as a joke because we were proud and scared at the same time. I thought about how hard it is to realize somebody has been narrating your life to another person while you are still living it honestly. The next week, I learned the affair had a shape. Darius was not some fantasy executive whose messages only stayed on screens. He and Renee had routines. Tuesday, client dinners. Friday, drinks at a hotel lounge near the water. A conference in D.C. that turned out to be one panel and an overnight stay. I found charges she had tried to bury under work expenses, and calendar invites were named as vendor reviews. Every new piece should have made me angrier. Instead, for a while, it made me ashamed that I had not seen what was right in front of me. One Saturday morning, I took the bus to Lexington Market because routine can hold a man together when his thoughts cannot. I bought catfish, lemons, and a sweet potato pie I did not need. Outside, a trumpet player was working through "A Change is going to come badly, but with conviction." I stood there longer than necessary, a paper bag warm against my wrist from the pie box, and made the second decision that could have gone differently. I could have gone straight to Darius's office or sent every screenshot to Renee's family. Instead, I decided I needed to know whether I was the only spouse being made a fool of. Darius had a wife. Her name was Naomi Whitfield. I knew that much from company articles and charity photos. She was usually pictured beside him in sleeveless dresses, one hand light on his arm, smile controlled enough to read as expensive. In one article, she was described as a former high school literature teacher who now chaired some literacy foundation. I studied those photographs longer than I should admit, not because she was beautiful, although she was, because her eyes looked occupied elsewhere. I recognize that look. It is the face of someone who has learned how to remain in a room without expecting truth in it. I did not know how to contact Naomi without becoming a different kind of problem. The answer came from chance, and Baltimore being smaller than it acts. My office sent me to a port-adjacent warehouse in Curtis Bay to review a vendor file. On the way back, I stopped at a narrow lunch counter near Harbor East, the kind of place with laminated menus, weak tea, and a bell that rings every time the door opens. I was halfway through a turkey club when she walked in wearing a navy raincoat and carrying a paper folder under her arm. I recognized her immediately and hated that I did. She ordered tomato soup and half a tuna melt, then sat alone by the window, staring at the street where delivery vans hissed through wet pavement. I told myself to mind my business. Then she looked up, and whatever was on my face must have answered something for her. She stood, walked over with her tray, and said quietly, "You're Andre, aren't you?" The fact that she knew my name made my spine go stiff. I nodded. She set the tray down and said, "I think our spouses have made us both into unpaid extras." Naomi spoke like an English teacher who had once enjoyed precision and had lately used it for survival. She did not ramble. She did not dramatize. She opened the paper folder and showed me copies of hotel invoices, one blurry photo of Renee stepping out of Darius's car near Federal Hill, and a bank statement with gifts purchased from a jeweler Naomi said Darius mocked as overpriced until suddenly he had reasons to visit. "I have known about his habits," she said, stirring soup she was no longer going to eat. "I did not know your wife was the latest one until 6 weeks ago. There is a strange relief in being devastated beside someone who is not performing." Naomi did not ask me whether I was okay. She did not offer slogans about healing. She simply laid out facts and let silence do what silence does when it is finally in honest company. I told her about the message previews and the Harbor Crown receipt. She closed her eyes for a second, not from surprise, but from confirmation. "He always uses the same places," she said. "He thinks repetition is efficient." Then she gave one short laugh with no joy in it. "Even his betrayals are lazy." We met again 3 days later, then again the next week. At first we told ourselves it was practical, comparing timelines, sorting documents, figuring out what mattered legally and what only hurt emotionally. We met in public, always daylight, always with coffee between us like a witness. A bakery in Mount Vernon with sticky floors. A booth at a diner. In Pikesville where the waitress called everyone honey. The courtyard behind Enoch, Pratt, when the weather gave us one bright afternoon before winter settled in. Every time, we arrived as two injured people trying to make a map. Every time, I left steadier than when I came. Naomi turned out to be funny in a dry, startled way, as though humor still surprised her when it escaped. She hated raisins and savory food. She kept a fountain pen in her purse and corrected menu apostrophes under her breath. She wore the same silver watch every day because it belonged to her father, a postman who believed taking care of time was one way of taking care of yourself. Once, while we waited for coffee, she told me she had spent 20 years teaching ninth graders to annotate novels and had married a man who never learned to read a room he was hurting. I started noticing how different truth feels from intensity. Renee and I had been living inside agitation for months, but Naomi never made me feel rushed into a version of myself. She listened fully. She asked careful questions. She did not flatter me, which made her kindness land harder when it came. One evening, after I told her I kept replaying the moment I saw that parking receipt, she said, "Do not confuse missing signs with deserving the lie." I had not realized until then that I had been punishing myself for trusting my own wife. That sentence loosened something in me. Darius and Renee noticed us before we intended them to. Betrayers hate being observed from outside the script they wrote. A week before Christmas, Renee came home brittle and overbright, set grocery bags down too hard, and asked whether I had been networking with a strange company. I looked up from peeling sweet potatoes and said I did not know what she meant. She laughed without humor. Apparently Naomi has been seen around the city with some man from municipal finance. Procurement, I almost corrected. Instead, I said, maybe she got tired of being home while her husband entertained himself. Renee stared at me long enough that I knew she heard the blade inside the sentence. She changed tactics immediately. "You are acting reckless," she said. "These are serious people, Andre." It told me everything. Now I am sorry. This is complicated. Just a warning not to embarrass the powerful. I looked at the woman who had once danced with me in our kitchen to old Anita Baker records and wondered when fear of losing access had swallowed her whole. Serious people still lie, I said. She took a bottle of water from the fridge and twisted the cap like she was trying to break it. January came with gray mornings and crusted snow near the curbs. Naomi called one evening and asked whether I wanted to accompany her to a literacy fundraiser at the Reginald F. Lewis Museum. I have already RSVP'd for 2, she said. Originally out of habit, now maybe out of strategy. I knew what she meant. Darius would be there. So would people who helped keep his reputation polished. I stood in my bedroom with my tie half knotted and considered saying no. Going with her would move us from private alliance to public fact. I said yes because hiding had begun to feel like helping them. That fundraiser is where everything changed shape. Naomi wore a plum-colored dress and a wool coat that made half the room turn without her trying. I wore the dark charcoal suit Lionel said made me look like I had finally forgiven my shoulders for existing. We checked our coats, took 2 sparkling waters, and walked into a room full of museum donors, school administrators, city people, and polished conversation about children reading at grade level. Darius saw us from across the atrium. He did not freeze. He tightened. There is a difference. Freezing is a surprise. Tightening is recognizing consequences. Renee was beside him in black velvet, pretending to study a silent auction table until she realized what direction his attention had gone. When she saw Naomi and me together, her mouth parted just slightly, more insulted than guilty. That hit me harder than tears would have. Naomi slipped her hand through my arm, not theatrically, just enough to make clear we were not accidental company. Breathe, she said without looking at me. People like him rely on your discomfort. So I did. I asked the school principal about attendance data. I complimented the crab cakes. I stayed visible. It was the most disobedient thing I had done in years. Darius approached us near a display case of civil rights photographs, which felt appropriate in a bitter way. Up close, he looked less commanding than the magazine suggested, just well-barbered and well-practiced. Naomi, he said, voice low. Andre. He spoke my name like we were men in the same club. Naomi answered first. Good evening, Darius. That was all. No extra heat. Renee tried to smile at me, a strained little curve that asked me to collude in my own humiliation one last time. I did not return it. Darius said we were creating confusion. Naomi said, no, we are ending secrecy. Confusion was your method. We did not stage a scene. We did not need one. The room handled the rest the way rooms do when power finally wobbles in public. Heads angled. A donor's wife whispered into her champagne. Somebody from the board looked directly at Renee, then away too fast. Darius kept his voice measured, but I could see panic in his jaw. He tried to draw Naomi aside. She refused. I saw, in that small refusal, years of swallowed things turning into boundaries. That mattered more to me than any revenge fantasy I had carried in the dark. It is one thing to hurt a liar. It is another to watch truth stop yielding. After the fundraiser, Naomi and I stood on the museum steps while cold air rolled off the harbor. We could hear traffic on Pratt Street and a siren somewhere farther inland. She laughed once, softly, from pure nerves, then covered her face with both hands for a second. I think my body expected punishment, she said. Instead, I just feel tired. I knew exactly what she meant. Exposure is not a triumph at the moment. It is exhaustion with cleaner air in it. I offered to drive her home, but she said she wanted to walk a little first. So I walked with her. Nothing physical happened between us then. I want to be clear about that because the title of this kind of story makes people expect some slick trade of bodies, as if betrayal can be balanced like books. What happened was slower and more dangerous. We became necessary to each other in honest ways. We called when one of us received a manipulative text. We read over lawyer emails. We remembered details the other had forgotten. When Naomi's furnace failed during the first deep freeze in January, I brought space heaters and spent 4 hours helping a technician get things working again. She made tomato stew and cornbread after. Renee tried 3 strategies once she realized I was not folding back into my old place. First came contempt. She said Naomi was using me. She said I was too naive to see when women like that needed a prop. Then came revision. She claimed Darius had understood her in ways I never attempted to. Finally came the injury. She cried at our dining table and said she had felt invisible for years. That one almost got me, not because I believed it excused anything, but because there is always some small true thing buried inside a larger lie. Marriage has changed us. I had not noticed enough. That still did not make betrayal a solution. I answered her more carefully than she deserved because I needed to hear myself say it. You could have told me you were lonely, I said. You could have asked for counseling. You could have left. You chose humiliation instead. She looked down at the table runner my aunt had sewn us for our housewarming and smoothed it with 2 fingers. I wanted more, she said. No, I told her. You wanted to feel upgraded. I do not know if that sentence pierced her or just offended her. Either way, it was the truest thing I had said in our marriage for months. Darius was less subtle. He called me from a block number in February and invited me to his office man to man. I almost declined. Then I thought about how men like him depend on private pressure. So I went, but not alone in the way he meant. Before I left, I emailed myself notes, shared my location with Lionel, and told Naomi exactly where I would be. Darius's office overlooked the harbor, and art arranged to look accidental. He offered me coffee. I refused. He said marriages were complex, adults made choices, and I would be wise not to confuse emotion with leverage. That meeting taught me more than the affair itself. Darius believed every relationship was an instrument. Loyalty, sex, money, silence. He spoke of them with the same detached confidence, like tools laid neatly in a drawer. He said Naomi was overreacting and Renee was brilliant but impressionable. I almost lunged across his desk at that. Instead, I asked whether his board knew he described subordinates that way. His face changed for 1 second, and there it was. Fear, not immorality. Documentation. I left without shaking his hand. 2 weeks later, an internal review began after Naomi's attorney delivered a packet that included much more than the affair. What Darius had not counted on was Naomi's patience. While he was busy managing appearances, she had spent years quietly keeping records, expense reports, settlement rumors, messages the junior staff sent after midnight, a pattern of mentorship dinners at places no mentor had any business choosing. My own procurement training helped organize the timeline. That is one of the strange ironies of my life. The habits Renee mocked as dull ended up being the habits that gave true structure. I built spreadsheets, cross-referenced dates, labeled attachments, and handed order back to chaos. Naomi looked over one of the binders and said, "You make facts stand up straight." The review widened. Renee was placed on leave pending interviews. Darius's name stopped appearing on the company's public calendar. People who had been impressed by him grew suddenly historical, as if admiration had belonged to a less informed version of themselves. Baltimore is a city that talks in layers. At the beauty supply on Greenmount, at church fellowship halls, on courthouse steps, in office kitchenettes where nobody is officially gossiping, news travels by tone as much as detail. By March, enough people knew enough. The marriage I had lost did not come back. But the humiliation began returning to the addresses that had mailed it out. During that time, Naomi and I kept crossing a line neither of us named. She would call after a hard meeting and stay on the phone through my bus ride home. I would bring her books from the Pratt branch because she said she missed teaching. Once we spent an entire Sunday afternoon repainting a little reading nook in her guest room, arguing over whether the color was more cedar or more clay. At dusk, we sat on the floor eating fries from a paper bag, our hands stained with paint, and she leaned her head briefly against my shoulder. Neither of us moved away. I wrestled with that. I need to say it plainly. There is a difference between companionship, growing, and using wounded people as medicine. I did not want to come to sort of man who called his damage destiny, because a beautiful woman sat beside it. Naomi seemed to know that without my saying it. On the night I finally admitted I was afraid of replacing one dishonest beginning with another, she nodded and said, "Then let us not lie, even in small ways." So we agreed on something simple and adult. We would finish what needed finishing in our marriages before naming whatever this was becoming. My divorce finalized in April in a courthouse that smelled faintly of paper, old coffee, and wet umbrellas. Renee wore cream, as if trying to appear soft in the eyes of clerk. We said very little. When it was over, she asked whether I had really fallen in love with Naomi or whether I only liked the symmetry of it. The question irritated me because it sounded clever. Neither, I said. I fell out of denial first. She looked at me like that answer robbed her of a cleaner story. Maybe it did. Outside it was raining lightly, and I felt oddly unremarkable, which was its own grace. Naomi's divorce took longer because wealth creates more paperwork and more ego. When it was finally done, we met at a little diner in Charles Village with cracked red booze and lemon meringue pie under a glass dome. No speeches. No declarations. She slid the signed papers into her bag, exhaled, and stared out the window at a man locking up his bike in the drizzle. I do not want to be rescued, she said. Good. I told her. I do not want to rescue anybody. Then she smiled, the first fully unguarded smile I had seen from her, and said, Dinner tomorrow, then. Not a meeting. A date. Our first real date happened at a jazz spot in Station North where the trumpet was too loud in the first set and perfect in the second. Naomi wore a simple black dress and small gold hoops. I kept catching myself grinning for no reason, which made me feel 16 and foolish and very alive. We talked about everything our crisis years had shoved aside. Her students, my grandmother's cast iron skillet, the way summer storms smell when they hit hot concrete. Nobody needed convincing. Nobody was auditioning for power. Near the end of the night, she reached for my hand across the little table, and I let relief move through me without suspicion. People like neat morals, but life does not hand them out clean. No, I did not steal Darius Whitfield's wife like a watch off a dresser. Naomi was never his to own, and that idea is part of what ruined all of us in the first place. What happened is that two people who had been treated like background furniture stopped agreeing to stay still. We told the truth. We made records. We ended what should have ended. Then, after all that, we chose each other carefully. There is nothing flashy about careful love, but there's a lot of peace in it. I had underrated peace for years. If this story pulled you in, then you already know this was never just about cheating. It was about self-respect, truth, and what happens when quiet people finally stop accepting betrayal. Like this video. Share it with someone who will be stunned by this ending. And subscribe now for more original relationship drama stories where every choice has consequences. So here is the practical part we want to leave with you. Pay attention to contempt before you pay attention to excuses. The parking receipt mattered. Yes, the hidden messages mattered. But the earliest alarm was Renee making loyalty sound embarrassing and ordinary decency sound small. Also, remember the museum night and the diner promise. The point was never just to watch Darius wobble in public. The point was to stop cooperating with lies and to refuse any new love built the same way. Consequences came. Grief came too. But so did self-respect, which is harder to replace than a spouse and easier to live with than revenge. The end.